So thank you all for joining us for our Student Organization Town Hall. My name is Krista and I am the Director of Student Activities, and I'm here today to help give some information about where we are with in-person events. And I'll just hint right now that we have a little bit of good news, but then you're going to have to stay on the call to get more information about that. So without without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and let Dr. With, our Vice President for Student Affairs, start us off and give you some information about where we are as a campus. Dr. With.
Thanks, Krista. Hi, everybody. Appreciate the opportunity to be with everybody today. And I'm just going to give a little bit of a snapshot of where the university sits in relation to COVID, just so that you guys have an understanding of the context in which we live, in which we're operating, and know inherently that our goal is to provide as many engagement opportunities as we can for our students. Your success is why we're here. And so our hope is to be able to continue to maintain the level of safety and security that we feel like we've been able to from the beginning. But in doing so, opening that up to more activities for you all. So let me tell you kind of where we sit as an institution. If you're paying attention to the numbers, you know that last week we were in the mid 130s. And so that number in and of itself, if we would have talked about that last fall, would have been, I think, very scary to many. At our height, I think once we got past the October Halloween kind of surge, we were sitting in the 150, 160 range, which was seemed very high. But that number of 130 represents a small number of direct impact to our campus community. We really are just coming off of the holidays and what that's looked like for families and get-togethers. And I think we're going to continue to see more of that. We're going to continue, though, to see our numbers go up. And likely we'll see the number of cases that have direct impact to our campus increase as well. The good news that we have is that we do not have any examples of community spread in any of our classrooms or any of the events that we have held so far. We feel very comfortable that the manner in which that we have brought classes back together, and in the few, and I will admit few amount of events that we've had on campus thus far, we've been able to manage them well. And so that is a good sign for us. But we're going to continue to monitor. Know that the 5 groups that the president created way back in, I think, May of last year continue to meet weekly. The leads of those groups continue to meet weekly. We make recommendations based upon the information that we have. We are actively pursuing having vaccines on our campus. In fact, we have been given the authorization to be a vaccine site. And as of right now, we're waiting on vaccines to be distributed to us. We anticipate that that will be soon. But what that means for us is not that we can start vaccinating anybody that we want. We still have to follow the CDC guidelines in terms of the phases that we're in. Currently, the country is vaccinating phases 1A and 1B, and those are our first responders, as well as folks that are over the age of 65, those that are 16 and over that have an ongoing chronic condition. And so we will continue to vaccinate based upon the basis. I mean, we would vaccinate based upon those phases. So that's happening. You also need to know that we're expanding testing a great deal across campus. And so Well Health continues to be in our garage. We worked with them to help vaccinate students as they came back onto campus that live in the residence halls. We have an agreement with a company that will vaccinate daily in the union starting later this month. And we'll have a little bit more of a big announcement coming about that so that you guys know the location and the hours, but know that that's coming, and that starts next week.
Elizabeth, can I just interrupt for just a second?
Yeah, sure.
You said vaccinate, and I think you mean testing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for interrupting me. Testing. Thank you. So testing begins next week. I'm so glad you said that, Lori. So testing begins next week. We are expanding testing on campus because we know that if we can test, we can isolate and keep the virus on campus, off campus. That's what we're trying to do. And so philosophically, we're going to test until we can vaccinate, until the virus is not of concern anymore. So you're going to see us amping up in that way. Testing will begin next week in the Union, 7 days a week. It'll begin the following week, 5 days a week in the Gateway Center. And then in addition, we are working on a contract to make testing available more widespread and likely in conjunction with our ability to have events on campus. So I think one of the things that you can anticipate is that we're going to have expectations for people who are on campus to test, gosh, I almost did it again, to test regularly. And in order to participate in events, likely we're going to ask that you have tested within the previous 7 days, and we'll have a process by which you'll be able to do that. We're going to continue to move in that direction. We know that our best bet about keeping the virus off is knowing when we have the virus on. And we know that we've got, and especially within our population, more asymptomatic people than symptomatic students. And so we want to make sure that we are identifying it whenever we possibly can. So more information is going to come to you. You'll know more about that actually in the coming days. But I just want you guys to be aware kind of that's the direction that we're heading. We've expanded our contact tracing team. We've expanded space on campus to be able to house residents who need to quarantine or isolate. And we're going to continue to move in that direction, doing all that we can to be as safe and secure as we possibly can. So with all of that, I'm happy to respond to questions at any point in time, but I'm going to turn it back over to Krista because you all came to hear more about how you can be more engaged, and she's got the fun part of the meeting. So I'm going to turn it back over to her.
Well, I don't know about that, but I am excited to be able to give you all some level of good news relative to where we were even last week. So I think I'm going to be able to answer most of your questions that you've pre-submitted in the presentation. If you didn't submit a question on the RSVP or you have new questions, feel free to start writing those in the chat. But you might want to wait just a minute in case I do touch on what you have to ask. So we have been approved by the COVID-19 advisory committees that Dr. With mentioned to move into what we're going to call phase 2 restrictions for student organizations. So phase 1, as a reference, is what we did in November. So hopefully most of you know what we did in November was very limited in-person activities on campus. So phase 2 is basically an extension of phase 1, but with the loosening of some restrictions. So let me run through some of them. So in-person activities will still be limited solely on campus, still nothing off campus or in or at fraternity or sorority houses, because the idea is we think we can be a better partner and able to ensure proper safety protocols when things are on campus. When they're off campus, we have absolutely no control over them. Reservations will be limited to certain buildings and spaces like the Union, just like last semester. We've added a few spaces this semester. And these are all these spaces were chosen based on access to cleaning crews who will be able to come in and sanitize the rooms between reservations. Again, trying to make it as safe as possible for you all. This is probably the biggest change. The capacity of the event or the activity will be increased from a previous cap of 10 students or staff or faculty. And it's going to now be based on the COVID capacity of the space, which will allow for social distancing. So for example, the Lyceum would normally have, I'm just going to start making up numbers, but the Lyceum, let's say their capacity is normally 500. The COVID capacity of that space is perhaps 100, which would allow for social distancing between people in that space. So the cap will now be whatever the space's capacity is based on the COVID capacity, if that makes sense. You will need to have, just like in the fall, a safety monitor at your event to help coordinate adherence to directives at event. This is just a student on your, hopefully, executive board who can help remind people, hey, y'all, let's stay 6 feet apart, and hey, let's please wear our face coverings. Not that difficult to do, but something that we want to make sure is in the forefront of your minds when you're actually hosting these activities. As I alluded to, everybody still would have to wear face coverings and maintain social distance at all times. There still would be no off-campus guests allowed because the university is still not allowing on-campus guests at this point. Since spaces are going to be limited, I mean, as y'all know, classes are going later into the night than they used to or they normally would. They are going longer on Saturdays. We have fewer spaces to give to you all or to accommodate student orgs. So in an effort to try to maximize space, you're not going to be able to ask for a specific room or a specific building. You're basically on the event application going to explain what your activity is, what you're going to do at that meeting or event, talk about your projected attendance, and then we will, the union will assign a space based on the information you provide in the event application. Again, to maximize space, we're going to limit reservations to 90 minutes, which is inclusive of setup and breakdown. After your event, you'll be required to submit an attendance list and, if applicable, a seating chart to student activities within 24 hours of your event or activity. And that's in case there is an issue where somebody tests positive. We will then have that information quickly and already to begin contact tracing on that list. Only student orgs that are registered with student activities for the spring semester are going to be eligible to host in-person activities. So that's why it's so important to get registered as soon as possible if you're not already. Once we do open this up, which I'll give you the dates in just a second, you're going to submit your requests for in-person activities via the event application in OrgSync at least 12 business days in advance of that activity. And that includes, the reason it's 12 business days is because it includes time for the committees to review, which I'll explain in a second. It includes the time for them for the union to then book the space and then time for you to promote it. All of that could take at least 12 business days. So for example, once you submit your event application, it's going to be reviewed and has to be approved by a hybrid committee and a number of other entities in order for it to be approved and for you to be able to have that activity. So the hybrid committee meets on Mondays. So if you submit your event application on Tuesday, the day after they meet, you will have to wait till the next Monday. So by the time it goes through the hybrid committee and then a number of other approval groups, so there's another group called Leads that reviews activities from the hybrid committee. So it'll go from hybrid committee to Leads and then to the president's office and amongst a number of other entities. So all of those reviews, all of those need to approve in order for your activity to happen. And because that process in itself could take about 5 or 6 business days, that's why we need that 12 business days in advance for you to submit the event application. Now, what I will clarify is that, and this is just like always, when we say submitted, that submitted includes the fact that your president and your advisor have already approved the event application. So if you put the information in OrgSync 12 days before your event, but your president and your advisor don't approve until 5 days before the event, it's not going to happen. So you need to make sure that once you do submit your event application, that you immediately reach out to the president and advisor and let them know they need to go into their email and approve that event, review and approve the event as soon as possible so that there's no holdup. All right, so the goal is for us, we're gonna work really, we just got the green light today. So we're gonna do our very, very best to have the event application open for in-person activities by 9 a.m. on Friday. But just know that as soon as it happens, we'll send you this information and this will only go to the registered organization presidents. So again, another reason to get registered ASAP. We will send that email out to the presidents. So please do not complete an event application for in-person requests until you know that the form is open for that. Otherwise, it's going to get denied because that means you got into the system before we were able to add questions, change the logic of the form and everything. So please wait for the go-ahead before you start submitting a request. But we hope we're going to try really hard to have it done by 9 a.m. Friday. And as soon as we do, we will let you all know. Again, so as a result of the event app needing to be submitted at least 12 business days in advance of the activity, that means the first date an activity can be held, most likely, would be February 9th. But again, we'll put all the exact information and dates in the email that we send out. And then just keep in mind that, this is a community effort to try to make sure we stay safe. So even though we are in this phase 2, if there are instances of community spread as a result of student org events, that means we may have to revert back to a previous phase or no phase, which would mean student orgs can't gather in person anymore. So we're really want to avoid that. So we're asking all of you to help in that process and make sure you follow the directives to keep everybody safe. And the last thing I'll say about this, and we'll take some questions, is when talking about activities, some students ask us about travel, and I don't know if maybe Dr. With may have a little bit more information about this and she can share if she does, but travel is still not allowed for student organizations. And like I said, I haven't heard an update on when that might be reviewed again, but if Elizabeth, if you have an update, feel free to share. Otherwise, we're just going to have to wait a little while to see when they change that decision.
We have not approved travel at all for the university. So no faculty and staff have approved travel. Students don't either. So I don't anticipate that will change this semester unless the vaccinating phase across the country moves more quickly than folks think and there's a significant impact. I can't imagine that travel will be approved, at least before the end of this semester.
Perfect. Thank you. Let me give a few other plugs because you heard me say the word registered student organization a number of times in registration. One thing that's really important for you all to know is we've heard a few times, or in the fall semester we heard, well, we're not going to register our organization so that we don't have to follow these rules. Well, unfortunately, your lack of registration doesn't preclude you from following university rules. So whether your organization is registered with us or not doesn't really matter. So regardless, you can be held accountable as an individual and as a student organization or a student group for not following university directives and the Code of Student Conduct. So please get registered. That's basically the most important piece is so you can get registered, then you'll be able to have these in-person activities. In addition, we will help you, Student Activities will help you all market your activities if you are registered. So for example, if you will tag us on your social media posts, we can't obviously share and retweet and whatever else it is on like every single post of yours and every single post of every registered student organization, but we'll do our very best to get the word out on at least a few of your activities from time to time to make sure that you're getting some coverage. And we have a pretty good following on social media, so hopefully that will help you all. But also another reason to get registered is to make sure that you can be found. After Sunday, which is the close of our priority registration, your organization will no longer pop up on OrgSync in a student org database search. When students are looking for things to do and we're helping students find things to do, if your organization doesn't appear in OrgSync, then that means nobody's going to be able to find you. So that's, again, another benefit of registration is that you get to show up on our online database. So just make sure that if you can get registered by Sunday, not only will you have a lot of these benefits, and I'm not even going to go into all the benefits of registration. These are just a few of them, but you'll also be entered to win a $100 co-sponsorship if you can get registered by the end of Sunday. So please do what you can to take care of your registration status by then. So anyway, that's all I wanted to cover with you all. And let's see if we had any questions that haven't been answered yet. And again, please make sure you're adding any to the chat if you have any. Melissa, did we have any pre-submitted questions that haven't been answered?
I did not see any. I think you covered most of them. Did you, forgive me if I missed this, but did you touch on religious organizations?
I did not. It is complicated. There are some exceptions to certain situations, so I didn't want to go into all the details for every exception, but that is a great question. Because of the governor's executive orders, religious student organizations are allowed to get together in person to do religious services. So still no exec board meetings, still no socials, things that are considered religious services. You can do those in person. However, we still, again, for the safety of the community, we're still strongly encouraging you all to wear masks, be socially distanced when you're doing these things. Hopefully that answered that question.
So one of the questions that's come through the chat, Krista, is can student organizations apply for Eagles Nest funding this semester? Do guidelines for funding differ for virtual events?
That's a great question. Yeah, actually I have good news about two things related to funding. Well, yeah, we'll say two. The first is, yes, if you're registered, and only if you're registered, you can apply for Eagles Nest. SGA has altered their funding to accommodate, at this point, just virtual events. But now that they know that in-person activities are going to be allowed, I will talk to them tomorrow about opening it up to in-person activities. But for now, yes, you would be eligible for funding for a virtual activity or for an in-person activity. The other good news is they have a grant called the RAUP Travel Grant, and it wasn't open in the fall because usually it's a grant to allow for travel, but it will be open. It is open right now in the spring, and that is for, we know a lot of conferences are going virtual, and so they've decided to change their funding. So instead of it funding travel, it can now fund virtual professional development opportunities such as a virtual conference. Still nothing, it still wouldn't be able to approve anything in person because again, university travel is not allowed. But if you have an opportunity through one of your, through your organization, maybe has a national association with a national virtual conference, that's a possibility. So I hope you'll consider submitting.
Great. And one other question is, can a student advertise their organization in a class if the professor gives them permission to do so?
If you speak to the professor and the professor allows you to do that, that is the professor's discretion. But otherwise, generally you wouldn't be able to hang things in the classroom unless there's an open bulletin board. But potentially if your professor, especially if if your organization is connected to an academic program like your major, in that classroom, if your professor is teaching a class for that major, I would imagine they would be pretty open to you talking about your organization.
And another question that has come, I think some people have joined a little later, and the $1 million question today is, can you go over again how many people can events or meetings be? Sure.
So I can't give you an exact number, except for what I can say in the fall, it was the limit of 10, no matter how big the space was. In the spring, right now, in phase 2, it will be based on the room. So for example, I do know this. So room 332 in the Union, I think normally has a capacity of maybe 100, but its COVID capacity is 32. And that will allow for you to make spaces between, like 2 seats in between each person so that you can maintain social distance at all times. So it really is going to depend on the room. Honestly, I'm not sure what the largest space is in the Union to know what its COVID capacity is, but I'm guessing it's probably in the 70s to 80s.
The Lyceum is 96.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. This is the tougher question that we've been grappling with for student orgs for a while, but the capacity of Zoom and 100, and what the advice that we're given because of the limited capacity that Zoom has for student orgs and the conversion to Teams and things like that. Can you talk through what we're recommending?
Well, that's a great question, and I don't know if maybe Elizabeth has any insight, but this is the first time I've heard this question, although I'm surprised about it. We can definitely look into the ability for us to maybe purchase or secure additional slots, because I know departments can do that for certain activities. I hadn't had that question asked of student orgs though, so we can definitely look into that. I don't know if Dr. With you have anything to add, or Melissa?
I think the best thing for student orgs, the Zoom licenses, it's cost prohibitive. I mean, we just don't have a license for all students and student orgs to have it. And then with the conversion of teams and us all moving to teams, students have access to teams and you can have higher capacity with teams. And so I know we got used to in March, you know, doing everything with Zooms, and I think we're just trying to transition everything over to the Teams environment.
Mm-hmm. And all of you should be able to, everybody should have a Teams account and an ability to download the Teams app, either to your phone and or to your laptop. So that's probably the best thing you can do at this point. But whoever asked that question, feel free to reach out to us after this, and we can look into some other options for you.
Yes. This next question might be more for Dr. With to respond to, but is there a timeline for orgs to be allowed to meet off campus, such as phase 3 or phase 4? Asking, and this might be Lori, asking specifically for rec sports planning on meeting outdoors.
Yeah, if I can defer to Lori, I think that would probably be the best, but I think we've had kind of general conversations about it. But do you mind, Lori, jumping in?
So as far as off campus, we will still follow the university's guidelines on, I assume we're talking about sport clubs. And so until other organizations are allowed to travel off campus, we will not be traveling off campus. So that includes our archery team or our equestrian team who you know, practices at off-campus sites. As what was the second part? Our fields. So in phase 1 or phase, sorry, Hillary, phase 2. For phase 2, we are going to allow some activities out at the fields. For the clubs that were involved with the return to play plan that we have put together, we will follow those guidelines, but work with our department and Hillary Wells on the specifics for each club, because each club is so different. Your needs are different, your activities are different. What we know for sure right now is that the meeting rooms in the rec center for sport clubs will be available in the next couple of weeks for you to start meeting in person. Does that answer the question?
Okay. What is there's a question about whether or not there are any approved rooms at Discovery Park.
Well, that's a good question and something we can look into. Right now, no, unfortunately, because I'm not aware of any. Again, the reason we've selected the spaces that we have is because they have cleaning crews pretty much almost 24/7 that can come in and clean the spaces. Whereas things like classrooms, they might get cleaned once a day, but in these spaces we've chosen, they would get cleaned after every single reservation. So I'm not aware of that as a possibility at Discovery Park, but I'll write that down and we'll reach over to Sergio and see if he has any ideas.
I think that's a really good question, and I certainly don't want anybody to feel left out, especially organizations that are based at that location. Let me see what I can do, Krista, to help with that one and see if we can do something about it. Good question.
Great.
Right now, those are the questions that have come through the chat.
Okay. Well, I'd say we'll give another minute or two to see if there are any other questions. Does anybody else have anything they want to share? We have representatives from Rec Sports, Center for Fraternity and Sorority Life, Student Activities. Does anybody else have anything they want to add? Or things that we've missed? Okay. Then I'll just fill a few more minutes while we wait to see if any other questions come in. So again, the hope is that we'll have some information about the opening of the event application by Friday morning. So please, the best way for you to know about what's happening and exactly when is to check your email. Whatever you've submitted, and this is gonna go only to registered student organizations. So if you haven't registered yet, you're not gonna get this message. But the best way to know what's happening is if you'll check, we're going to send an email to the presidents. The second that we open the event application for in-person activities, we will send you all the presidents an email. So whatever email you have submitted as part of your profile within OrgSync, that's where you're going to get it. And just I'll also mention that we do take event applications for virtual activities. So if you're trying to promote that you have a virtual activity, please feel free. You're not required for virtual events to submit an event application, but we do encourage you to, because again, that's another opportunity for you to promote your activity to a wider audience in our calendar that we share with students. So anyway, all right.
Okay, a question did come through.
Yay.
On what about outdoor meetings? And right now we just don't have outdoor spaces outside the rec fields at this time.
Right. It's maybe a possibility for a future phase, but at this point, that's correct.
And then another question was, just to be sure, am I correct that we have absolutely no in-person meetings or events right now?
Right this second, yes. But that's kind of what this whole point of all this information we're trying to give you is, that we will hopefully have that event application opened by Friday morning, which would then allow you to submit for in-person activities, meeting, event, whatever it may be. That would be able to happen starting at least 12 business days later. So by mid-February at the very latest, you would be able to start having in-person activities. So if you can just hang on a few days. And the other thing I would suggest is the second you see the message from us saying we've opened the event application for in-person activities, get your information in ASAP. That way you make sure you get a space, a good space for your activity. So. But yes, right this second until the time that the first event is allowed, which will be hopefully by around February 9th, nothing should be in person.
Another question is, can Eagles Nest funding be used for event participant t-shirts, not executive board t-shirts or uniforms, but participant t-shirts?
Historically speaking, no. SGA has chosen not to do items that are like takeaway that are only for specific students and can't be shared as part of a broader benefit to the student body. But they are able to change their rules every semester. So I'm not aware that they're allowing that right now. I can mention it to them as an interest and see if they want to open up or change their policies, but generally speaking, they don't fund things that go to just one person, like a plaque or an award of something of some sorts. So
another question, I'm going to ask this one. There's one about religious organizations again, but I'll save that to last in case some students want to jump off or others want to jump off. But did you say that student organizations must be registered by Sunday at 11:59?
That's our priority registration deadline. So that's the best date to get registered by. Now, if you don't happen to get registered by that date, we will still accept registration after that. But this is the best time to do it. One, to make sure you're getting all these messages about the events from us, but also to be entered to win that $100 co-sponsorship.
And so our last question that might not apply to many of the groups on here, so feel free to jump off if you want to, but if they're asking if you can repeat the information that you said about religious organizations.
Sure. The governor's executive orders do require that religious student organizations are able to meet in person for religious services. So that doesn't include things like exec board meetings or socials. If you have a religious service, worship, a Bible study, those things are allowed to be in person according to executive order. However, we are still asking that you do things virtually whenever you can, that if you choose to do things in person, that everybody wear face coverings, everybody socially distance, and that's, the hopes are that you're keeping your community safe, so that we can hopefully move into a subsequent phase sooner than later.
Great. No new questions have come in. Okay,
great. Well, if that's it, then I want to thank all of our panelists as well as our staff who have taken the time to be here and listen and answer questions. And now there's a new question, although that's not really about student org. So I don't know, Melissa, how you want to handle that one.
So there is. We will continue to adapt to the current conditions. So I'm hopeful that as the vaccine becomes a little bit more widespread and more people are vaccinated, we're able to do more in person. And that's always the hope that we have. And we constantly monitor it. And so, Dr. Witt, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to what I've said related to that.
Yeah, because the vaccine is farther down the road, likely for our student population, I want to encourage people to test. I do think it will be part of a requirement to test in order to participate in some of these events as we work our way through, but we'll have the availability for optional testing for students beginning next week, in addition to what's happening already at the Union Garage. And just want to encourage you all to make sure that you're consistently being tested. That's going to help our campus community. It will help us open up much faster. Appreciate you all thinking about that. And I really do want to thank you all for all that you've done this far. You've been very patient with us. I think that you've done a wonderful job of abiding by the rules that not only the university has, but that the country has placed before all of us about wearing masks, social distancing. I appreciate it so much. And you guys have done, I think, gone above and beyond in helping us to open safely. And I think that bodes well for us as we move forward through this semester to be able to have as many events as possible. So keep up the great work.
All right. So yeah, just keep an eye on your emails because we're going to send out that information, and please do not fill out an event application for in-person activities until you get the green light to do so. All right. So thank you all so much for coming. And again, I want to thank all of our staff members, including Dr. Witt, for being here today. And she's, well, everybody's busy, but I appreciate her taking the time out to do this for us. And if you have any other questions, feel free to shoot us an email, student.activities@unt.edu. And if that's all we have, then we will say goodbye. And again, we'll put the recording of this, we'll get this out on our social media, and I'll link it up to the email that we send out so that you can refer back to this whenever you need to. All right, thank you all so much. Have a great day.